Hi good people, Titus here for part 2 of our day and night cycle in Unreal Engine. In this video we're going to be making the moon and actually adding some rotation to bring about our little prototype here. So let's not waste any time and just jump right into it. So hopefully you followed along in part 1, if not you might be a little bit lost. Recommend watching that video if you haven't. But let's go ahead and first create our moon. So I have a moon texture that I downloaded from the web. So let's go ahead and drag that into our project. And then with that texture, you can just right click and create a material off it. Our material will be m_moon. And then we can double click to open that up. And then I'm going to dock this in our parent window here. This material is going to be very simple. We're going to add a singular scalar, so we'll hold S, click on the graph to get our scalar, and we'll just call this brightness. We'll hold M, click on the graph to get a multiplier node. We'll hook this along with the RGB here, and then we'll pass this into the emissive color, save, and then we're pretty much good with the material. And I'm actually going to hide myself so I don't block anything. From the material, you can right click and create a material instance. We'll call this mi_moon. And then when we double click this, we'll have access to set those parameters that we just adjusted. So we're just going to check the brightness, and then I'm going to maybe do a value of 10 starting off, so we get a nice bright moon. So pretty simple. We'll save that, and we'll go back and we're going to create a new blueprint class. We're going to do of type actor, and we're just going to call this BP_moon. And then we're going to double click to open up our blueprint here. And this blueprint is going to be very simple. We're going to add a sphere. We're going to title that sphere as the moon. And then for the material, we'll do mi_moon, and we'll add the material we just created. So just like that. Now there's a few ways we can tackle this. I want this to actually rotate around my world, so I can handle those rotations manually. Another way I can do it is I can add an offset to this sphere, and then I could just rotate the sphere around the default scene route. And I think it's an easier, simpler way, so I'm just going to go that route. So first I need to pop this thing in the air. I'm just going to pick 20,000 units. So it's basically really high up there. And then I'm going to move it over in either the X or the Y. Doesn't matter. I'm going to do the X for now. And I'm going to do the same 20,000 units. So now you'll notice if I increase this here, I'm just going to try to zoom really far back. You can kind of see what we're doing. So we're basically going to rotate this scene route, and the sphere will kind of rotate around it with this offset. So it'll kind of look like it's rotating around the planet. So we're basically kind of faking it. Our moon's kind of small though, so let's maybe hit this little lock and scale it by 40 in the X, Y, and Z. Another thing I would like to do is I would like this to rotate. So we can set up some basic primitive code to get that to do. If we go to the event graph, under the begin play, we'll just add a timeline, call it rotate the moon. And you can use play or play from start, doesn't matter. Double click so we can edit the timeline, and then we're going to add a singular float track. We'll just call it spin, and then we'll add 2 keyframes. So we'll add our first keyframe by right clicking and doing keyframe, and then we'll do a value of 0, 0, and then right click, add a keyframe, and our second value, I'm going to do a 30-second timeline, and then I'm going to set that value to be 359 degrees. And then I'm going to adjust the length of the timeline to 30 up here. And then I'm also going to set this to loop by hitting this button here. The reason I'm choosing 359 is because when this starts at 0 and it reaches 359, the value of 360 is the same position as 0 when it comes to rotation. So just a heads up on why I'm doing 359. It'll be a nice, smooth, even rotation as this thing loops, basically. And then I come back to my event graph, and I now have the spin value. So I can grab my moon by holding Control and dragging this in, and then I can simply pull into a set relative rotation. I can break this structure pin here, and then I can pick an axis to rotate this on. Doesn't really matter, you can use X, Y, or Z. I'll just throw it in the Z for now, and then I'll hook up the update pin here. And then you may want to play with your rotations. Maybe you want to rotate it around multiple axes, just kind of get a different effect. Just kind of see whatever works best for you. So now if I come back to the viewport and I hit simulate, you see it's kind of slowly spinning there. And I think that's perfect for what I want. So now if I go back to my level blueprint, and it's a little bit bright out, so I am going to hide my direct. No, it doesn't really work that way. Let's see. Can I rotate this? That's fine. We'll make it work. So let us go ahead and just add our blueprint into the scene. Now you can see the moon's very big. The location I want to reset to be world origin. So I'll put that at 0, 0, 0. And then our moon is just kind of like basically sitting there like that. And I think that's kind of perfect for what we're trying to do. So now when I play this, it'll be night. And then we basically just need this moon to kind of spin across the night sky. And then we'll go ahead and get that working here. And we also need to get some moonlight going as well. So we'll work on that. So let's open up our level blueprint. So we'll click here, open level blueprint. In the last video, we created a custom event for sun. So let's go ahead and create another custom event. We'll call this one moon. And then on the begin play, we're gonna call the moon right after the sun. So they'll both kind of kick off their respective timelines. And then for the moon, we'll do add timeline. And then we'll just call this timeline underscore moon. I'll leave this one under play just to show it doesn't matter. Either one should work there. And then we just need to adjust the moon's kind of like world rotation. So we need a reference to do that. So let's go back and make sure BP underscore moon is highlighted. And we can right click, create a reference here. And we can pull into and do set world rotation. And I actually do not want to use the moon, I want to use the default scene root. So set world rotation, and I want to rotate that default scene root. And it's very important you select that because we are trying to rotate this thing right here. When we rotate this thing, this is a child of that, so that'll rotate as well. So we'll get the right look that we're going for. So we'll drag this down here. We can split this structure pin. And you can figure out which axis works best for you. If I go back into the blueprint here, I think the x-axis worked best for me. So as I rotate it, it's gonna look like that. But you can play around, you can maybe do the y-axis, which is not too bad either. You could rotate multiple axes if you wanted to. That's what the z-axis does. And if you wanted to, you could add multiple moons to your prototype, and maybe you get some cool celestial bodies moving around. So a lot of options there. So let's double click on our timeline. We are going to add a single float track for now. And our timeline is going to be 60 seconds, and we are currently, I'll do this one as the moon. So let's set our length to be 60 seconds because that's what we were working with in the previous video. We are going to set this to loop. And we'll add our first keyframe by right-clicking, add keyframe. This one we're going to do 0 and 270 is what I found worked for me. And then the last keyframe I'm gonna put at times 60, and I'll do a value of 630. So why did I get 630? Well, I'm starting at 270 because this kind of starts in the middle of the nighttime scene when I begin this prototype. So I need the moon to be out and spinning in the upward position, not underneath the horizon. So that's kind of what worked for me. And then from there, just to make the math easier, I just basically added 360 to 270, which is actually an error. This should be 629 in order for it to loop. I don't think you'll notice it 1 degree because it's going to be so far away, but just keeping with it, it should technically be 1 degree underneath, so it loops over appropriately. So we can compile that, and now I can basically plug this into the X and hit the update here. And let's see if we got this rotating correctly. So there's the moon coming out in all its glory. It is slowly spinning, and then you kind of see it through the night sky. And it does give off a little bit of light, so we're getting some bloom effect from the camera. And then as it rotates down, the sun starts to come up. Our night sky kind of fades away. And then we set the intensity of the sun, and then the scene lights up. So there's still one issue with our scene is we don't have any moon light. So we need to actually correct that. So what we can do is we can go into our inspector and simply hide our directional light for the sun. And then we could simply add we'll hit the add here. And we'll add another directional light. And we're going to rename this one and append it _moon, so we can kind of tell it apart. And because our directional lights, actually this one you might be able to get away with stationary, but no, we're moving it. So set it so it's movable. Because yeah, we're going to be making this light go away when the sun comes back up too. So set that to movable, and for a default value, moonlight's typically very, very low. So maybe 1 for the lux, and then it's usually, as we perceive moonlight, is kind of bluish. So you may want to add a blue tint. That way, kind of perceived as moonlight. And then we just basically need to handle the rotation code, kind of like we did with the other directional light. There's some other things we'll want to address with this, like for this one, I would disable cast shadows, just not to worry about it, and just let the other directional light take precedence. The other thing too is you might get an error or warning. If you bring back your directional sunlight, under the advanced section here, there's a forward shading priority. On the sun, set that to 1, and on the moon, make sure it's 0 or lower. That way the engine knows which one has priority. It'll probably already automatically assign priority to the sun because it's a higher, well, not always actually, sometimes it's 0. So yeah, it's probably good to set this here. That way the engine doesn't get confused and throw any warnings or error messages. So that way, because we're using 2 directional lights basically. But yeah, so now that we have this set, let's get the rotation right. So we will select this in the inspector. We'll go back to the level blueprint. We'll right click, create a reference to it. And then from that reference, we can do set world rotation. It'll grab a reference to the light component, which is correct. We'll split this rotation, hook up these pins like so, and then we just need to adjust our timeline to make use of this rotation. So we'll add just another float track, and this one we can call rotation, I guess. Whatever you want to name it, doesn't matter. This one's going to be very similar to our sunlight. So we will do this start at 0, 0. And then our next one will be 60, 359. Actually, I lied. No, that one is not going to be. That's going to be for the sun. So this one is going to be 6630. And this one right here is actually going to be 0 to 70. Because I forgot we start in the night cycle. So because when we push play, we're starting at the night cycle. We want this to be 270, so the rotation's right. So our moonlight is actually positioned correctly. And these are the values that work for me based on my positioning. So let's go back here. And we now have that rotation. And we typically are using the y-axis for the directional lights. So we'll plug this into the pitch. And you can tell that if you take any directional light. If I adjust the y value here, you see you get, well, that's the, let me do the sun so it's a little more evident. You can see the light dramatically shifts when you adjust the y or the pitch value, versus the z values does a little bit of something. The x value doesn't really seem to do much of anything. But okay, so we have that all set. So now let's actually play our scene and see what it looks like. So now you can see we kind of have moonlight out where it was dark before, like it was pitch black. We can kind of get that bluish hue, so it looks a little bit more correct. And the sun kind of still comes out, or I'm sorry, the moon comes out, kind of spins, does its thing. And then as it starts to set, the blue light will go underneath the map. It's so low that I don't think we have to worry about the light bleeding like we did with the sun. And then the sunlight will come out and just oversaturate and cover any imperfections with the moonlight. So before we had to adjust the intensity of the sun when it went underneath the horizon. The moonlight, since it's only 1 lux, it's so low power that I don't think you're going to notice anything weird. If you do, you can kind of do the same thing where you just adjust the intensity as it goes underneath the horizon. And then kind of get it that way. So there goes the sun. Night sky should start be making an appearance here. Here comes the moon. And then we're basically have our working day and night cycle. All right, everyone, this basically concludes our day and night cycle 2-part video series, but I hope you found some informative value that you can take into your own projects. But as always, thanks for watching, consider subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one.